Yep, we're live.
All right. Okay, I'll kick us off, y'all.
Right. Let's go.
Let's do it. Okay. So the HBO show The Wire follows the Baltimore Police Department as they investigate organized criminal activity. And today on the Wright Perspective, we are going to recap and discuss the third season of the show, which premiered in September of 2004. And after our discussion, we will determine if the show is indeed a classic from the Wright Perspective. And so each episode, we pick a voting symbol that is relevant for the show or movie that we're talking about. And so today, for The Wire Season 3, we are going to rate it by giving it 1, 2, or 3 hamsters.
No.
No? Okay. little play on words? No?
No.
All right. Okay.
I can't. We should do police badges.
All right, police badges.
Police badges. Okay, we did badges before though.
Did we?
We did badges for we did pagers.
Pagers?
Yeah.
We did pagers for season 1. Season 2, we did containers.
Yeah.
And so season 3,
we're doing
badges.
All right.
Police badges.
Police badges. Okay. All right. I want to tell you, I'm not 100% satisfied with badges. To me, it does not feel.
What else will we use?
I don't have a better idea because I thought hamsters was a top-notch idea. So I don't know.
But it doesn't
it doesn't go with
nothing.
It doesn't. It's not good. Okay. So yeah, badges.
I mean,
it's not good. Okay, so badges. Okay, so it's so in terms of format, well, first, why don't we do introductions, bro? Why don't you kick us off?
Hi, I'm Aubrey. I'm the oldest.
I'm Genia. I'm the middle.
I am Brittany, and I am the youngest.
Yay! Okay, so we are going to attempt something that has never before been attempted in the history of the Wright Perspective podcast.
in our long history.
In our long history of, I believe, 6 episodes. We have never before attempted to do this in a timely manner. We just haven't. And so, but this episode,
it's not a concern.
It hasn't been before. But today, this episode, we're a whole new podcast because we are going to manage our time, folks. You just get ready. We're going to knock your socks off. All right, with our great time management. So we are going to go first into a quick recap of season 3 of The Wire. And then we are going to move into certain discussion topics that we actually picked in advance. See, look at this upgrade. So we picked some topics in advance and we're going to move through those topics and we're going to manage our time. All right. And we're also looking forward to you engaging with us via Facebook. So please chat it up, send us notes, and Brittany's going to keep us in touch with you during the course of the show. So let's start with our quick summary of season 3 of The Wire. So as I mentioned earlier, the show follows the Baltimore Police Department as they investigate organized criminal activity. In season 1, the show focused on the local drug trade. In season 2, we get farther up the supply chain and we got a peek into the international criminal activity that was taking place in Baltimore via the Baltimore docks. And in season 3, the season we're focusing on today, the show focused on the political pieces of the puzzle, especially city and state participation, aka corruption and shenanigans. So local politicians are feeling a ton of pressure to reduce the crime rate in Baltimore for their own selfish reasons, such as needing to get reelected and to keep the public pressure off of them, and also for actual good reasons. So to keep people safe and to keep people from moving out of the city. And also to keep funding in the city. And so the politicians end up putting a ton of pressure on the police department to keep the crime numbers down. And they basically say, do it by any means necessary. Don't tell us how you're doing it, but you need to do it. And this leads the police department to employ some questionable tactics, including the creation of 3 free zones in the city where drug dealers can essentially deal drugs without fear of penalty, and drug users can use drugs without fear of penalty. And we spend a lot of time in the season in one of the free zones in particular, and that one is called
So drug dealers can deal drugs and drug users can use drugs.
That's right. But
okay,
it's with but you're missing the little important caveat there, bro, which is that they can do it without fear of penalty. Okay, that's what's happening in the free zone.
I know.
Okay, and then we spend a lot of time in one of the free zones, which is actually called Amsterdam. So you see, that's why I was recommending that earlier for our voting mechanism, but I did not get support on that recommendation. And so when the police officer tactics come to light, the politicians are scrambling to either distance themselves from the problem that they created, or they are trying to find a way to use it for their own gain. And our favorite characters from seasons 1 and 2, the police department, and our characters from the Barksdale Drug Organization both have a role in implementing or leveraging this controversial tactic of the free zones. And they also, both groups, have to deal with the fallout of the zones. And while they're dealing with the regular war that they always have going on and their internal wars within groups, they are now dealing with this ongoing war between the politicians and the police department. And so that is a high level overview of what happened.
I got to tell you, sister, I'm already impressed. I'm already
so good.
We are managing the heck out of this time.
You're cooking with Crisco already, right off the top.
Yes, that's the good stuff. Okay. So, bro, do you want to kick us off just to get into our discussion?
Well, our first topic that we're going to kind of get into is the just talking about the politics of it all.
Right, I've started the timer.
All right. Yeah, we are like
15 minutes.
Oh my goodness, it is so organized right now.
Oh my
it's
God.
Unbelievable.
So impressed.
But yeah, and I'm gonna tell you that it was very interesting watching how they portrayed how the political side of this seeps into everything, and I just really love that because in the show, obviously we have the mayor, Royce, right? That's his name. And obviously he has all his political connections and all that kind of stuff. And it's just so interesting watching how all of those little connections actually are only like 1 or at most 2 degrees removed from the illegal drug trade. Mm-hmm. Because even like you alluded to in the beginning, the whole thing that is kicking this off is that these police officers are under it's you see the people who don't really care about what's going on, but they just for their own selfish reasons just want this number to get to this number to get down,
just arbitrarily reduce this number.
Yeah, just reduce this number. Yeah. But they don't want to know how. And the crazy thing is at the same time the police officers run the risk of their whole career if they try to do anything to fix the problem. So I think that we were talking about how this drove so many of the police people or the police officers to do things that I don't think they would have done if, number one, actual help was what the goal was. Well, I'm saying if the goal was actually, policing, if that was the actual goal, they would be able to do a lot more. But just because of these people from on high who don't even, one thing that was interesting, because you talked about the free zones and stuff, but what's interesting is that a lot of the politicians had no idea what was going on, just because they don't even drive through these,
It's completely out of touch. Completely out of touch. And all the politicians were concerned about. And you alluded to this, bro, but when the politicians were saying reduce crime, what they were actually saying was have fewer numbers to tabulate. So they weren't actually saying go into the community, understand the issues, and let's all partner to resolve them. They weren't saying that at all. They were saying have fewer murders somehow. Just have fewer. We don't want as many. Have fewer drug arrests. Just have fewer. Without really at all talking about the problem. They never once said, go and figure out what's happening and resolve it. They just said, get us lower numbers. That was it.
And what was interesting, and I wonder how close this is to reality, is how, because of that political pressure, they are now changing like the crimes around, like they'll take a felony break-in and change it to something else, misdemeanor vandalism or whatever, just all the different things that they're not actually solving the crime. They're just changing it so that at the end of the day, you'll be able to report those numbers. And because of that, the numbers might fluctuate, but what's actually happening just stays the same.
Or gets worse.
Yep.
Just changes.
Because what you end up realizing is that the job description of police is either wrong or incomplete, right? I mean, what we end up seeing is that, the politicians, their role is supposed to be partnership with community, right? That's what we think of. They're supposed to be partnering with community. And especially we're talking about local politicians. These are city council people. Okay. We do get to the state level, but we're talking about city council people. We're talking about police commissioners, these people that are supposed to be in touch with the public and at the heart of their roles, having a sense of what people need and what the problems are, and then working with those people to get solutions. That's what they're supposed to be doing. But they spend so much time with like self-preservation in mind. How do I just stay enrolled? Right. How do I just stay present?
And I do want to take a moment and say hello to Billy, Joey, and Cassandra. They are watching. We have more viewers, but you guys, the live won't show us who's all showing. So if you can chime in and say hello, we definitely want to shout you out because we appreciate you for being here so much. So thanks, sis. Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to make sure I shouted everyone out that's commenting.
Well, I would love to hear some comments, sis. What are the people saying about this role of the politicians? Because listen, you know what? We need you all to weigh in on this because, I mean, as I was watching this season, I found myself being so angry with the politicians as individuals because they were the absolute worst. But what the actual issue is the way that we expect politicians to perform. Yeah. Right? Because there's a piece of their work that is performative because it's like, if they aren't seeming, super great to us
and put it all put together,
if they aren't telling us the numbers go down, then we don't believe they're effective. When the reality is that that's not really what we should be challenging them to do. We really need to be asking them to like do some kind of long game strategies about stuff. But that's not what we want. We want progress. We want numbers. So the community also has a role to play here and how broken all of this is.
Well, yeah,
so
I was just going to say that I felt like Genia in this season more than usual because it's incredibly
it's a hard not fight, I'll tell you that.
It's just very frustrating to see. Let's talk about, so we have the mayor, Royce. We have the city councilman, Carcetti.
Also known as Lord Baelish from Game of Thrones.
Okay.
Listen,
Yes.
yeah,
And
Bayless
he
shouldn't
also-
be up in
He
there.
was
Also-
a jerk on Game of Thrones, and he
also-
was a jerk on The Wire.
Also known as Lord Baelish, according to Janai in our text thread that we were talking about this show, because
Very selfish.
my sisters and names they just won't connect them. But but it's
He
just
knows who he is. He
but it's
knows
just-
who he is.
but you have him, you have the other Tony Gray, who's also the city councilman, and ultimately a race for mayor emerges from through between the three of these people, between Carcetti, Royce, and Gray. And one of the things that is so funny when you hear all of their camps talking, nobody is talking about actually affecting anything. Everybody is just talking about the strategy to just win. And it's just so frustrating, because if somebody came in, let's say there was somebody else who wanted to run for mayor and they just wanted to improve things, they wouldn't even be successful because they're not sitting in these back rooms just trying to figure out how to win. Oh, this city is this percent of this demographic. And, so because of that, I need this person to run so that, for one example, Carcetti, who's white, wanted Tony Gray, who's black, to run for mayor, not because for any other reason than he would split the black vote from Royce, who's the current incumbent mayor. And it's just...
And that would be the only way for Carcetti as a white person to have a possible chance of winning in Baltimore, a place that is mostly black in terms of its population.
I will tell you, Cassandra, she did say serving without divine purpose. Just talking about the police and just what they're doing. I'm not really looking at their purpose. And Keisha said that Lord Baelish, in reference to Lord Baelish, you see what happened to him on GOT.
Yeah.
So she was saying, you see what happened to Lord Baelish.
Yeah.
On,
you get taught a valuable lesson. Eventually you get, because you know what, and you know
politics,
what?
Yeah.
Go ahead, sis.
So I was just going to say the hard parts about this are when they are ready to shut down Amsterdam, right, which we'll get into soon, they start talking about the good parts.
Well, let's just get
there's
into
some. Well, there are some parts that, because to still speak on the politics part, is that there are some parts where you can see the glimmer of them trying to do something right, to see a little piece of this, to see it do it in a correct way. But there's so much corruption. There's so much trying to, again, this self-preservation piece. There's so much trying to push this person out. There's so much of these outweighing them when they start to get a little piece of it. Even going to the community meetings that they had. These community meetings in the beginning of the season, 10 people. 5-10 people coming in. You could tell they're the ones that are like, I'm at every community meeting. I know all these people.
Because I'm sick and tired. Because I'm sick and tired.
When things started to improve, that community meeting had more people. And they were more willing to be a part of the neighborhood and to do more things. Lord Baelish, in his own little twisted way.
Can we call him
Carcetti?
Thank you.
Carcetti. Listen, I was about to start calling the man Thomas like I know his mama. Thomas. Okay, guess that's his first name. Okay. Thomas, what makes me laugh the most about him is that he is high off his own supply. He honestly thinks in his mind that he cares. When the truth of the matter is, Thomas, you care about becoming mayor. And right now, this is what is important to you. Because I think he has a slippery slope type of personality. But with the pressure trickling down, people feeling like they're not being heard, then you have the state office to come in and say, you did this, we're cutting off $500 million or $1 million.
Billion.
We're cutting off $500 million of your resources to your city. What do you do in that moment? Somebody has to take the fall. somebody has to take the fall. And you guys, we're down to 2 minutes and 35 seconds on this topic.
Well, I think that to go back to your point of talking about Carcetti, because he's one of my favorite characters in the show, because I think he has a very interesting arc, because right from the beginning, we see him philandering, he's running around on his wife, just doing these different things, but he's also got this other side of like what you were talking about. One issue that he brought up was how witnesses who come forward to testify in cases are not safe. And this was one thing where he tried to go out of playing politics, where he just, the way they portrayed it, because
I disagree.
In every moment where he was talking about it, every moment where he was talking about it by himself, even when they were showing him by himself, it was like he was saying, well, I want to do this one thing, like outside of the politics, I want to do this one thing. I'm not going to, leak it to the media, nothing like that. Like this one thing, I want to just go talk to the mayor and just say, look, we just need something to help these people who are witnessing. But the point I'm trying to make is when he tried it that way, didn't work. So even when, and I guess we could debate what it seemed like his, with reference to that one issue, it seemed like his intentions were as close to pure as it could be. And I'm just saying,
I would agree that they were as close to pure as can be, but I would still say his actual intention was to find a thing that he could do that he would be able to put his stamp on. And so the reason he picked that thing was because he felt like it was a way that he could create and leverage relationships to push himself forward. So if you recall, when he first came to that tactic, came to that solution as that problem as something he wanted to resolve, he immediately moved into wheeling and dealing in order to be able to make it happen. He went directly to the police commissioner and went to the mayor. And in those moments, he was talking about himself. He was being very selfish. He was saying, this is something I can do. This is the place where I want to have impact. He was not at all actually advocating for protecting people. He was advocating for the message of having been the protector of people.
But he wanted to be able to. With that being said, it's time to go to talking about what it looks like protecting a neighborhood. We're on Amsterdam.
Man, now I see why our show goes 18 hours, because I got so much more to say on category 1. Well, so let's segue. Thanks for the time check, sis. And
I do want to say hello to Ryan. When our family is on here strong, y'all. Ryan, Keisha, Alexis. We have Ruby on here. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for chiming in and coming in. We want to hear your thoughts.
And thanks for the time check, sis. So we're moving now from the conversation of like, okay, the politicians, they had mixed motives. They were all somewhere on the spectrum of trying to help the people to trying to help themselves. And regardless of where they fell, it ended up creating a ton of pressure for the police. And so there was one police person, Major Colvin, and listen, this is like a seasoned police officer. This man been in the game. In fact, he's at the beginning of the season, he's just 6 months from his 30-year anniversary. He's ready to retire. He's put in his time, and he has seen the police force evolve so much. And he started in this place of like in his career where police have relationship with community, to now what he's seeing as this extreme, as this war between the police and politicians and the people who are seen as the evildoers and the criminals. And so he is in this desperate state. He comes up with this idea of the free zones that we talked about earlier. And I got to tell you, Major Colvin, he was one of my favorite characters in this episode, in this season, because you saw this man just feeling like again, bro, back to the spectrum of like whose motives are actually pure. Major Colvin was like, listen, we're going to get these numbers down. Okay. And he said, and I know exactly how we're going to do it. He went out with one of his partners, somebody on his team, and they went and scoped out the parts of the city that were getting no attention from the residents or from the city itself. These were vacant places that full of dilapidated buildings. And he said, you know what? If crime happened right here in these little isolated zones, it would move it out of the places where people are living. It would move it out of commercial zones. It would move it out of active residential zones and into these areas that are like kind of like dead areas in the city. And so he literally has his police officers in his whole, the West Side, where he has leadership. He has them actually beat the criminals off the corners. And he tells them, if you go set up in these free zones, we're not going to touch you. You can do whatever in the HE double hockey sticks you want. And that's how we find ourselves in Amsterdam. And what
probably should explain the name.
Oh yeah. You want to take it, bro?
Well, when they're in the process of moving these street level drug dealers to these free zones, obviously these are not people who, first of all, I mean, just imagine somebody telling you you could go sell drugs basically legally in these zones. You know, first of all, they can't even wrap their mind around that, because even one of them made a point at that, look, we sell the drugs, you try to stop us, you're messing up the rules.
That's the game.
So there was a lot of resistance getting them there. And in one of these conversations, one of the police officers was saying, look, if you go here, it's like Amsterdam, you know, because it's free, you know, just say
it's legal.
It's legal essentially in these areas. And it was just another thing that these corner dealers, their world is literally just their neighborhood. And so they never even heard of Amsterdam. So they heard Hamsterdam. And that was the name that ended up spreading out throughout the city.
That's why this show is so good. This show is so good because it doesn't miss an opportunity to create a message.
That's right.
You know?
And contrary to what Janai says, it had nothing to do with hamsters.
Okay.
Nothing.
Thank you for that underscore. Thank you for that underscore.
So you guys, these free zones, if you can imagine, all types of shenanigans are happening in these free zones, and literally the police, yes, the police are sitting at the borders, just watching all this happen. Now, many of the police are doing this, or all of them really are doing this under the premise Colvin has told them, listen, we're going to get all of them in one place, and I'm time checking myself, we're at 10 minutes. We're going to get all this in one place, and we are going to then get these drug dealers clean. But first, we're going to worry about the other parts of the neighborhood. And so you guys, inside this, you have drugs, prostitution. You're seeing all types of drug addicts. You're seeing all types of activity. But here's the thing about trying to control crime. Crime begets crime. So you have some of the drug dealers. You have the drug dealers getting robbed by stick-up kids and other drug dealers. You have a situation where now, because the drugs are all happening in one place, they don't know what are called the hoppers, which are the younger children who are the ones that go get the drugs after the money has been passed to a more mid-level drug dealer. Well, not even so much mid-level, maybe a little bit under mid-level. They'll get the money, and then the hoppers go get the drugs and give it to the addicts. Now they're saying, well, we don't have any use for the hoppers. So the hoppers, they were making money. Now they're not making money. And now you're seeing other problems starting to happen, and police are having to get involved and say, listen, even to the point where he said, listen, you need to give these hoppers money because this is unemployment. So having to even teach them that these things are happening, you're just seeing this subset of issues start to emerge within this thing. Wow, the streets that were we're trying to clean them up. Now we've just really made a situation, but you're starting really good things happen as well.
Yeah.
So you don't, do you all think Amsterdam was a good idea? That's what.
Well, I'll tell you this,
because you're talking about definitely how much was going on inside of Amsterdam, but to me, if we're talking about actually reducing harm, and you, Janai, you said something about Major Colvin. I don't think he never really talked about the numbers. It was like he was talking about actually reducing crime, and which is a different conversation. And that's why he's one of my favorite characters as well.
100%.
Because he put himself on the line, like, look, I need to try to do something. Before I'm out of here, before I retire, I want to try to do something. I want to do
something.
And to me, the free zones was a phenomenal idea, because if we talk about what was actually happening, yes, it was going down in those areas.
You know what? It was a wonderful. I would say it was a wonderful beginning of a concept. What emerged really quickly, though, is that it was an incomplete concept, because the concept was basically treating criminal activity as if it was something that you could consolidate and keep it from, keep the numbers from growing. That somehow if you took this population and you put it by itself, that it would be able to be in a little silo by itself. But that's just not the way it works. And so the numbers just kept growing. The numbers just kept growing. It was, and as Brittany said earlier, it was creating new issues. But
not
really
too,
though.
You guys don't forget,
but not really.
There were rules.
Not really.
They were not allowed to fight, and there were no guns. They did give them those rules,
but they ended up having de facto other services brought into the place. So
right. Let me just say this one thing before we move on, is that it didn't. They didn't have that many problems. Like they had the one problem with the stick-up kids, and then they corrected it. And the biggest problem outside of that was the murder, which.
I don't disagree with that, bro. But I guess it is a solution if you accept the operating assumption that drugs and drug dealers will always be there. If you accept that operating assumption, then yes, it was a really great solution. But if what you are actually saying is your operating premise is that these things are challenges that emerge out of larger issues that need to be resolved, then it is not a perfect solution. Because as we talked about in the prior seasons, the reason people were turning to drug dealing, that it was actually economic issues. It was actually accessibility issues. It was actually all the things that come from economic issues, like need for healthcare, need for family support, need for education. It's a community not having a legitimate tax base so that they aren't getting services from the public. They aren't getting public dollars. And so it's not actually resolving the issue. It's not solving it at all. It's not solving it at all.
It didn't have a chance to.
But putting the drug dealers all in one place doesn't resolve the issues that create the need for drug dealers and drug use. Let
me just offer this as, because yes, putting them, first of all, consolidating is a great way to resolve issues in any discourse that you could think of. So putting problems in one place is always a great way to be able to address things. But now that they were all in one place, there were a couple of things that could have happened. And I'm just saying that could have happened. And the first thing is that now that you got everybody in one place, you can start tackling the issues one at a time. Just like when they talked about, when they brought the public health people down, that look, now we can start exchanging needles. Now we can start passing out condoms. Now we can start doing testing to find out for STDs. Now we can start doing, and they said they were even starting to get people's ear, which would, in terms of bringing them into drug rehab programs, which is
now hard to find the addicts. Sometimes it's hard to keep up with them.
Well, yeah, because they're usually all over the place. But now we got them
all over the place.
Now we got them in one place where we can start getting to know them and learning. And here's the other side of this, is that the rest of the city was flourishing. Okay, so what I'm saying is if you had a situation now,
well, the Western District.
The Western District was flourishing, but once you have the rest of the city flourishing, now we're starting to be able to create economic opportunities.
But what I'm saying is it's not actually flourishing. The numbers are still the same. But no, what I'm saying is the amount of criminal activity has not decreased. So the number of drugs
because it didn't have a chance to.
But what I'm saying is what's actually happening is that they aren't counting what happens in that zone. It's not that I'm not
talking about the numbers. I'm talking about the fact that these people no longer had crime happening in their direct neighborhood. I'm not talking about what I'm saying is if this was able to continue, it had, to me, I think it was one of the best ideas ever, because not only do you have the public health, not only do you have people possibly being able to create other opportunities now that there aren't drug dealers on every corner, but also one thing that they spoke about was it takes away from the once it becomes legal to do, in a sense, it takes away from you kind of being this, gangster bad person because you're doing something so it takes some of the allure out of it as well. And in my mind, I feel like if they really focused on that over time.
I will tell you, Keisha, she did make the comment that everyone, when you said Sodom and Gomorrah, Janelle, Alexis, Joy, and Keisha, they were all like, preach, LOL, you're being Veronica, you're being our mom. And then Keisha did make the statement that there is no honor among thieves. And also, hey, Nick and Toya. They doing this as
we could do a whole podcast on whether there's honor among thieves.
And I will say one thing, because we have 30 seconds left in this part. I just wanted to add in that while, again, this may not have been the ultimate solution, right, to the problem, we were starting to see some young boys find interest in other things. They were beginning to be able to be kids again. They were getting to play basketball, and the police were starting to interact with them and have a little bit of fun. And one of the individuals who had just gotten out of jail, he created a boxing ring. Like these kids were starting to find alternatives other than dealing drugs, which then brings us into our next topic, which is talking about the police crew. You guys, listen, when I tell you people, we are committed to these time frames.
So hard.
Like we're going to have to revisit, because I really feel like we're missing some good stuff.
We are. We need to be somehow, next time, we need a more organic transition or something. Because it's like we're just like stopping the conversation so abruptly. It's so hard.
It's so hard.
Discipline is hard. Change is hard. Keep us moving.
It is tough. It is tough. Mm-hmm. But we are on to the next topic, which is talking about our police crew, which I will tell you, I just love the Avengers so much. I just love them so much. But I will tell you, it's funny getting to know more about McNulty, because he has been a wild card since he was a police officer. Since he started, the day he started, he pushbacks to that's what he wants. This has just been McNulty since he has been there. And so learning more about them, I'm like, this doesn't excuse McNulty from being a butthead. But it does make us start to understand you more.
Well, so what was the understanding you got?
Just about who he is? I just was like, why are you being so insubordinate with Daniels, who
Okay.
is the lead lieutenant over them. And I just couldn't, I was like, what? Why? You need to be fired. But then I also just noticed that when someone has been allowed to be who they are since forever with really no repercussion, when are they, why would they change?
Okay.
So I'm going to continue to do my own cases. I'm going to continue to do whatever I want to do when you're clearly telling me to do this one thing, even though it's based off a hunch and I want to continue to see things through. But you also are starting to learn more that policing is all McNulty has. You knew that, but you see that in this season, his coworkers are calling that out. Lester said to him, "You don't have anything outside of this?" And he was like, "You need to get a life outside of here." And once McNulty is seeing things fall apart, he is realizing, I do need to get something outside of here. I do have to have more. But it's hard because when everything on the outside is falling apart, my ex-wife doesn't want me anymore. My little side piece is now somebody else's side piece. The lawyer is sleeping with Daniels. We won't get into that. And then you have these portions. He's like, I really do have to have something outside of what police work is for me. So just seeing McNulty actually start to listen, I was like, all right, what she call him in the police bushhead, what a little bushy head. I just appreciated him start. It took a minute, him starting to, and then also him realizing, you know what, this is better for me to be on the beat. I want to go back to where I was. That's what I love. So yeah, I appreciated seeing McNulty this, but this is the part I will say of the whole thing that frustrated me the most was this police work in this season. It just felt like nothing was coming together. And I was like, okay, all right. Are we all not talking to each other? What's happening here? I feel like people were having 20 conversations and nobody's having a conversation together.
And I think that's one of the things that we're trying to show. That, often the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. And so what about Daniels? I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on how his relationship obviously deteriorated. He created a new relationship. So
we see a ton of relationships have deteriorated. Lives outside of work have deteriorated this season. We saw at the end of last season that Daniel's choosing to stay with the police, even though he could have had more professional progression outside of the police department. His choice to stay there made his wife very frustrated, and we end up seeing that she now has political aspirations of her own. She's actually running for city council in this episode, and Daniel's he's in his own apartment. He's living as a single man, and ends up dating the state senator that McNulty had been seeing on the side while he was married. Also, we see Kima, as Brittany just mentioned. Kima's marriage continues to struggle. Kima is now stepping out on her wife. Same thing. Wife is frustrated because Kima is so focused on the job and doesn't really have values around progressing in their personal lives. Kima's not interested in having a baby. Unfortunately, they have one, and Kima ain't into it, And we also start to see some disconnect between. And this isn't new, but Presbeluski. He's another character that we see having a disconnect between who he actually is and who he is supposed to be in the outside world. His wife, his in-laws, they're putting pressure on him to be a leader in the police force. And we're figuring out that not only is he not great at typical street level police work, his actual passion and interest is something in data analysis, that he's learning that.
So good.
But unable to really flex that skill set. And then we see Herc Ellis. Ellis is actually someone who he's moving up the ranks in the police department. But guess what? He doesn't have the strategic skill sets that are needed to be a leader in the police department. He is actually only good at going out on the street and beating up people that have been identified as criminals. That's the entirety of his skill set. He has no ability to organize people, to organize teams, or to look for actual issues and to resolve them. He has no ability to do it. And so there's just a ton of disconnect that is coming up between who the people are trying to be or who they are thought to be and who they actually are and what they can actually do. And that's unfortunate because who ends up suffering? The city. The city ends up having its issues unresolved. And we end up seeing fighting and tension in the teams. And bro, you started talking about Daniels. Listen, Daniels is still one of my favorite characters now. Did he really become, less super awesome to me in this season for many reasons? Why, yes, he did. But he remains the person who is the most consistent and at work, at least, in terms of like, he is trying to get the work done. He's like, what's my assignment? All right, let's
listen.
do it.
I don't know, sis, because what upset me about Daniels is that he still became major. And as soon as Daniels became major and then found out that his wife was going to be on the ticket, because he's still married, even though he is now having a relationship that was once private, now public relationship with someone else. Everything that he had said at one point, you guys, he had made this really just like awesome statement. They created a line for Daniels that was amazing. And him saying to the state senator that he's sleeping with now, listen, I owe it to my wife to do these things because I want.
She's a lawyer.
Well, lawyer, yeah, because she's. I was saying state senator because I was like, I thought she was a lawyer, but her being a lawyer, the lawyer that he's sleeping with, he says, listen, I have responsibility to my wife. I've already put her through so much. I'm going to see this through. I'm going to play husband for her at a few chicken dinners. When he finds out that regardless of what happens, that she's going to be on the ticket and that he becomes major, whatever loyalty he was still having to her is gone.
No, that's
even now.
That's not what happened. What happened?
But that's what he said to the lawyer. That's what he said to the lawyer. He said, my wife, she's going to be on the ticket regardless.
That's right. So it wasn't that he lost his loyalty.
It was resolved.
It was a moot point.
But is it a moot point when the public still thinks that you're married and now your husband is out and about with another woman holding hands?
No, they're out now. So now their separation is out. That's what he's saying. He's saying that they don't have to
have the appearance of being married
anymore. Have the appearance of being married anymore.
They had the appearance of being married so that she could get elected.
Right.
But now that she's going to be elected, they don't have to have that appearance anymore. They can let go of the pretense.
Yeah, so they're publicly separated now. So so when he's with
honey, I needed to see that. I needed to see that part because let me tell you something. In my mind, until there is a divorce, he is still married. He's still married. And it still looks bad. Like there's nothing you can do about that. Whether she is in the office now and all this different stuff. No, now you look stupid because you're still married to him on paper. Whether it's in your heart and in your mind, you're gone. You're still married.
There's people get separated, and the public in this particular situation is just that they now don't have to fake because there's not going to be any negative impact from her because now it's just people get divorced, people get separated, people who would be voting for her are not going to look at her as lesser because she's going through this life circumstance.
But even if they do, his point was my goal was to get her elected.
Exactly.
That's what I owe to her, and she's now going to be elected. Sis, what is the chat saying? What are the viewers saying about the relationships and stuff with the police crew? No comment
right now.
I'm gonna tell you, I thought that one of the things that I think is really important to name really quickly about the police department characters is that
one thing before you go to that, I just want to say I do not like how the show created this relationship between Daniels and the lawyer. I feel like it was abrupt and it just happened and it was something they added in. So from a technical standpoint, I didn't like it. I just thought it was unnecessary.
I agree.
Please continue with your point. I just thought it was unnecessary.
Because I wish we had more time because I would like to go deeper on just even that lawyer and the vicious relationship cycle that she keeps getting in. Why you keep getting with other people's men? You know what I
There's
mean?
so
Like
many.
this wanting,
There's
this
so
wanting,
many.
this targeting Mary. Like there's a lot of brokenness there in her. I wish we had time to talk about.
So stupid.
But the point I was going to make was that the crew, our main characters, they were not actually focused on Amsterdam, and in fact, they were not aware of the free zones. Right? Not all of them. There were a couple that were aware. Herc and Ellis knew because they were under the leadership of Mayor Colvin and direct leadership. And so they knew about Amsterdam. But the other ones didn't even know about Amsterdam. But guess what? They ended up encountering Amsterdam because why? Because all of the crime and all of the drug dealing have been consolidated to Amsterdam. And so to Aubrey's earlier point about it being effective in consolidating the conversations, we clearly saw that box checked because we actually saw within our primary characters, they were working on multiple other things. There were at least 3 other aspects of Baltimore crime that were being investigated by them. And all of their attention ended up being focused on Amsterdam, at least to some degree, because that's where the crime was consolidated. So in that way, bro, we actually saw what you were talking about, the effectiveness of the consolidation. Because what ended up happening is they all ended up working together. When actually they were focused on different things, they were able to then organize their thoughts and efforts because all of the crime ended up being so clearly connected, you know. And I want to talk.
What about Kima? What about Kima and her wife? How y'all feel about that situation?
I got to tell you, it happens every day. Happens every day when people fake the funk. Stop faking, people. You know, Kima pretended to be interested in having a baby, pretended for the sake of progressing her relationship along, but she wasn't really interested. And so what does that mean? It means that Kima and her wife may not actually be compatible, right? Same thing with the wife. The wife got with Kima, but wants Kima to be something different than Kima actually is. And this is the point where people have to sit down and say, are we still compatible? We may not be, and maybe we never were because we weren't being honest. And that, but the mandate always is make it work at any cost. And so Kima fakes the funk. And now here's this baby. Only one parent wants the baby. Kima literally doesn't even touch the baby. I don't think the whole season. We never see Kima touch the baby. If anything, we see Kima sit on the couch and give the baby the side eye.
Snarling at the baby.
Snarling at the baby because she's not interested. And she finally just owns up to it, but she owns up to it too late. She's like, I only said I was into it because I wanted you. I was saying what I had to do to get you, wife. And now I got you, but now you done got this baby over here. So I felt like it was too bad, bro. But it was also, again, the show pointing out like, this is a reality. This is what happens. People get in it. They fake the funk, but now they in there. And now they feel a need to continue to pretending.
And there's 30 seconds left in this topic, that just to say that Kima made a statement to McNulty saying, I'm turning into you. Who would have thought that I'd be turning into McNulty with the similar life of, I'm not who you want me to be. And I can't be who you want me to be. I can't even be it for myself, no matter how much I want to. But with that being said, Kima and McNulty in their relationship, as they were going forward in their police work, they never stopped looking up the organization. Stop doing it, which was an excellent situation. So who wants to jump in that on our last 15 minutes on our last topic?
Well, I know we got to transition, but I got to violate the rules because we cannot.
I love violating the rules.
We cannot, because the rules are meant to be broken, because we cannot leave the police crew segment without talking about the race question that came up with Presbeluski. We just have to just name it, even if we can't go deep.
Explain the situation.
I'll explain the situation. What actually happened was, as we talked about earlier, and we talked about in seasons 1 and season 2, Presbeluski on the streets, he is a terror. He is a terror because he's not good at it.
Horrible.
He's not good at being on the streets. He probably does have some racist inclinations, which most white people do, they mean to or not. It is just a function of being socialized in America. And Presbeluski, we see that playing out in his policing. You know, we watched him abuse people in the community, Black people in the community in the earlier seasons. We watched him shoot. And so that was his evidence of him like not really having a relationship.
Sis, I want you to know that Rod is encouraging you to break the rules.
Okay, rules. You
Shout out
rules.
to Rod. Thanks,
okay,
Rod.
thank you, Rod. Rules, you got rules. Because you know what? The other thing we see that Przybylewski, his skill set, his basic skill sets are not sound. You're not good at using a gun. Okay. You're not good at following police street protocols, such as yelling out police to identify who you are. That's a simple tactic we all know just from watching Law and Order. So he's not good at it. But because of what? Because he's in this job, he can't get out. His father-in-law, who is a higher up in the police department, keeps pushing him into leadership roles and pushing him into opportunities. He can't get out. And in fact, when he does violate the rules, he keeps getting off. They keep pushing it under the rug or minimizing the actual impact. Things like shooting your gun in a closed office environment accidentally. This is how whack he is. And we see him out on the streets once again, because it's a part of his job description. He's out on the streets and he ends up
let's be clear. He was out to go get sandwiches. They went on a dinner run. And McNulty heard a call. I was like,
but it is
go get the sandwiches.
But it's in their job description that if you're on duty and there is a crime nearby, you must go now and check it out. And so what ends up happening? We see Przybylewski with his ill-equipped self, out in foot pursuit of a criminal. And guess, because there's a shooting happening. They're trying to find out where the shooting is happening. And Przybylewski walks up on a Black man with a gun and shoots him. Now, it turns out he drives up on a Black man with a gun and shoots him. Now, it turns out that Black man was a police officer. And if Przybylewski had taken the 2 seconds to just yell police, then they would have had a chance to identify each other as police officers. Now, we all know that a gunshot, like this is the kind of thing that really can, in an instant, take out a life. And so you're on the fence because you're like, Przybylewski saw a person with a gun and immediately shot him. And so you're part in some ways, you're like, well, the person had a gun. But the other thing is like, was the person even like holding the gun up in a way that it was pointing at Przybylewski? You're not sure until later on when Przybylewski is sitting there reflecting on what happened. And he just flat out admits, I'm bad at this. I was ill-equipped. I'm paraphrasing. I'm bad at this. I was ill-equipped for the situation. My life was not actually under threat. I just saw a person with a gun and I shot him. And so we then find out that it was pretty arbitrary in the way that Przybylewski ended up shooting another police officer. But guess what? Who's out on the streets walking free in the earth? Przybylewski, because he's a police officer. And so the consequences are minimal. They're minimal. So we just have to name that because they didn't spend a whole lot of time on it because they didn't need to. But it raised the question within the police department about race, racism, and leadership and sanction. And all of that came up in the context of this guy who is just a complete F up, but keeps being deployed over and over again.
In the wrong circumstance. So he's an F up in the wrong circumstance. The stuff that would make Przybylewski excited, he was able to zoom in on a license plate. He was like, look at this. He was so happy about it.
Gosh,
because I love technology. I just hate it.
I know we got to move on because there's a whole segue here that we don't have time to get into about what happens when you as a person start to realize that you are not in the right space in life. Right? That we're seeing it in the marriages. We're seeing it in our professional experiences all throughout this show. You're seeing people that are not a good fit for the space that they're in. And there's a conversation to be had about having the courage to leave. It is about having the ability to leave. Some of them don't have the ability to change their circumstance. There's a conversation to be had about people letting you be different. Przybylewski was saying, I'm not a good fit for this. But things around him and people around him just kept pushing him back into the circumstance. So anyway, one day when we aren't having time constraints, we go deeper on this general concept.
But your concept does bring you into two people.
Why, yes, it does. It's a segue concept.
Into the back into concept.
That's right.
So you do have Bubs, who is an informant for the police, a CI. But we're starting to see Bubs become more of who he is. One of the good things that came out of Amsterdam, Bubs had already started to not do as much drugs and started to really see, like, I don't want to continue to get metal and sell it for drugs. I want to get some real money from the police officers. You're actually doing something. You could see him starting to want to do something different with his life or be some sense of who he used to be.
Explain what his job with the police is.
So as a criminal informant, Bubs, he goes and he buys drugs from the people. He gets the cell phones that they're throwing out onto the street.
It's intel.
He is intel. He is getting all this different stuff.
He's serious about it.
He's so serious about it. And then, but
he has an hourly rate. He has negotiated an hourly rate for himself.
He has an hourly rate, but you see him starting to set himself up. He's like, listen, Kima, hold on to some of this money. Oh, I'm about to start a t-shirt business. I see them wearing them long tees. He's walking around with a grocery cart selling t-shirts, you guys, to the point where in Amsterdam, one of the young hoppers who has nothing to do sees him selling the t-shirts, and he starts saying to him, you know, you need to start looking into selling hoodies because it's starting to get cold outside. To that, Bubs takes him under his wing and starts showing him, like, he's helping him sell these white tees. We're starting to see this mentorship happening that we've always seen in Bubs, because there was a young white boy that was an addict that he was like saying, listen, you're doing too much drugs. So he was like, slow down. Which he does die at the end of this season, that young man, because there was another man telling him, slow down, you're doing too many drugs.
Good mentorship, bad mentorship.
Exactly.
Well, it's also just
so much
I feel like that Bubbles is just a master class in character development. Like,
he's so good.
Just seeing how
so good
nuanced that character is, and it pulls you in on a level because you really feel like, man. First of all,
I got to pull up that actor's name because I can't remember it. But
one thing that's good about The Wire,
he's great in everything he does.
It's one of those things where you feel like you're watching actual events play out.
Andre Royo. Yes. Andre Royo. Listen, the man is a pro. Okay?
And watching him have all these different sides of,
complex.
And you just think of, man, it was just one of those situations where you think if he was born somewhere else,
any other circumstance,
we've talked about,
and then you get to contrast it against, I'm escaping his name, but his friend that he was running with, the white guy,
the young white guy.
But when you see somebody like him, you feel like wherever he would have been born, man, he was just running towards destruction. That was just in his personality type. I'm just saying, it's just interesting because you get to see different types of people.
Yeah.
Where, the tragedy isn't always the same. It's like, and I feel like Bubbles is just, man, that was just an amazing.
Yeah. And so we see Bubbles not having an opportunity to fully transition. He is an addict. We're seeing he has aspirations for more, but he's not able to fully transition out of it. There's another character that pops up this season that does get a chance to transition. And this character, what is his name? Cuddy. And he's my BFF. I love me some Cuddy. Okay. Cuddy is someone who had been incarcerated for 14 years, who was a part of the Barksdale organization, who actually, he gets out. He's completed his time, and he has the opportunity to continue in a life of drug dealing. And at first,
before you go forward, I just want to pause you. We have a comment about Bubbles. From Rod, he said, if you guys are interested, there is a breakdown of the Wire seasons, and they break down how Bubbles played his part so well that the people on set thought he was a real bum one day. They thought he was a real bum one day, and they put him off set almost.
Oh my gosh, what a great tribute.
So
what a great tribute. You know, because he is one of those actors
funny.
like,
thank you, Rod.
I don't care what other part he ever plays in life. Like if he plays like a Messiah, I will always be like, man, that was a good drug addict, because he was so good.
Remember at that time he was on crack. He was on that heroin.
Oh,
you remember that?
So this other character, Cuddy he's been released, and he is we're watching him again, so much complexity in the portrayal. We need to pull up that actor's name, because Cuddy, he is torn because he is not feeling actually inclined toward the life that he once had. But guess what? What are the options that are available to him? What is actually available to him as options? He does not have even a high school diploma. And so if he does not want to pursue a life of drugs anymore, of drug dealing, what does he have to do? So he tries to go straight. And what does going straight do for him? Well, you know, not much, because he's out doing landscaping. And that turns out not to be a super great fit. But he's doing it because it's an option that's available. And then that's not going well. It's not fulfilling. He remembers the bells and whistles.
That's to the point you've made before. Why landscaping is his only option. Once you're incarcerated, your life is taken away from you.
And he had been in the drug game for so long. It really was the primary skill set that he had going into prison. He had been a really top-notch defender in the drug game. And so he then ends up exploring drug life again. And what? There are some parts of it that are great. There are women, there's community, right? Like he's got a crew, he's got people around him who are investing in him. Now they are investing in him so that he could go and ruin the community, but he has a community around him, he has friends. And even in that, he's not a good fit, because the game has changed. The game is not what it was.
Chad Coleman,
you're very good. And
right.
he ends up.
He also plays on All American. He's great.
And bro, this is now to your point about the good things that came out of Amsterdam. Okay, because he was not a good fit in the landscaping and in that kind of life of the blue collar work. He was not a good fit anymore for drug dealing. There was a point where he had to shoot someone, which is one of his top-notch skill sets before he went to jail, and he didn't feel like doing it, so he didn't do it. And the thing is, let me just say this. Cuddy is, when you talk about... I hope he won an award.
When you talk about gangsters, he is the top of,
He's the G. He is the G.
Like when he came out, just the respect that he still had after 14 years. Mm-hmm. His name still rung out in one of the most aggressively gangster cities that you could think of. And what I'm saying is his name still rang out. And to just see that transition of it, like Janai said, at one point he gets back into the game because there was nothing else. But that point that you're talking about where he was about to shoot that guy. And not only was it a rival gang member, but it was also when Cuddy first came out, he got some drugs as a coming home gift that he gave
a significant amount of drugs.
He gave it to this rival drug dealer because he wasn't in the game yet, just to sell out and split the profits, which the guy stole his money.
Betrayal.
So the point I'm making is if there was ever a situation
to shoot somebody
in this game, if there's ever a situation that this
bop somebody, that's it. That's it. And he couldn't do it.
And that was just great TV, man.
It was such great TV because we were all in the crisis with him. Part of you is like, shoot him. He stole our money. But then the other party is like, don't shoot anyone. People shouldn't be shot. But then you're like, but then again, he did betray us. But then you're also like, Cuddy, we're so invested in you. We want you to be a good drug dealer. Be successful awful at that. But then you're like,
listen,
no, Cuddy, you don't want to be a drug dealer. Don't do it. It's so complicated.
Listen,
but
it's so complicated.
But then a third option emerges. And it only emerges, frankly, because of Amsterdam. A third option emerges, which is for him to go into nonprofit life. And he ends up creating a nonprofit organization that is teaching young people how to box. He ends up opening up a nonprofit gym. And that option would not have emerged for him if it had not been for the specific circumstance of Amsterdam creating idle youth, because these are youth that would have otherwise been deployed in the drug game. They were available. He ended up, through circumstances, coming into contact with a deacon at a church that had relationships in the larger nonprofit and service community. And then he ends up, because of that convergence of circumstances, actually finding a path that it seemed like it was a good fit for him. He's probably a person, if he had a different kind of life, you know, growing, like if he was born in our household, I always take these characters and I'm like, if they were born in our household, if Cuddy was our brother, he probably would have been a teacher. He might have been a nonprofit leader. You know, he might have just been someone who was out on the streets. He actually could have been a religious person. There's so many ways that his servant leadership could have played out for him if he had grown up in a different context.
There are two things though that come to my mind. One, if Cuddy had grown up in a household like ours, would he understand those hoppers as much as he does? We can understand the hoppers from the outside looking in. Hey, stop hopping. There's something else to do. But
Pop
when you've been out
for some enrichment, for some academic and cultural enrichment,
get your tail in here and get a sandwich.
That's right.
But for Cuddy, he has the reputation enough to go into those places and he knows he's not going to get bothered. And then he also understands where you're coming from. You had to be there to get it. And I'm so happy you made it out. And especially because that type of drug game, that type of game, all things come with their own type of PTSD. And so he can understand those young boys in a different way than someone else. The other thing I wanted to say was that I think about how Cuddy came out and he's seeing that drug different than what it used to be. So he's seeing at one point, there is a young guy from the Barksdale organization. He's clearly stealing money. You could tell from how he's dressed because his money is short and his girlfriend and how she's dressed. So Cuddy back in the day, you handle that, but you teach him a lesson and then you move on from it. And he's learned the lesson. And so he's seeing these two, but now it's like you die.
Yeah.
Cuddy is like
the honor.
Wait a minute.
Where is the honor among thieves? That's right.
There we go.
Yep.
We still need them. And they're like,
no, he's got to learn. Yeah. Yep.
And then also this no longer training the kids up, which I use that very loosely, right? Training them up to be these better drug dealers that are committed and loyal. They're allowing these kids these opportunities and things, and they're going out doing things that they have no business doing. For example, shooting at someone on a Sunday. That is just a rule that the drug dealers have. We don't do this on a Sunday, let alone
Sunday truce
in front of a church.
It's called the Sunday truce.
The Sunday truce, or let alone in front of a church, and there's an old church lady that is going to get hit. We don't do this type of thing. But because these young boys are coming up and they're not training them these things, they're not training these things, they're being allowed to be more loose. That's why there's probably even more killing in the street than there needs to be, maybe, because the answer is become this instead of like there even being some type of respect. Even though we're all doing the same thing and I want to win, there's no longer this respect. So I think that was happening in so many ways.
Sis, you have just, and again, we've thrown the time clock out the window to some degree, but to move us on.
Oh, we haven't. I put it back at 10 minutes more, and we're down to needing. We're at 4:44.
Oh, we may have to go over just a skosh, because I was just gonna say what you have just sis in talking about that push and pull between like old school, way of doing things and new school way of doing things. You have just segued us to what we, between the three of us, have been calling drug dealer cooperative economics. And so, bro, I wonder if you could take us through, because
I didn't call
this okay, but he listened as me.
He did. He called.
So he was complicit. And so that wouldn't stand up in a court of law, bro, because you were present. You were present, and you were there.
You didn't deny it.
He didn't knock us. He didn't.
Where's that lawyer lady?
But bro, maybe you can take us now into, because this is, and you all may know this from our last 2 episodes of our podcast.
Quick side note: Aubrey, Keisha said that Cuddy would have been a bishop if he was in our family.
Listen, or he might have been my boyfriend that I met in our neighborhood, because I really would like to date him. But anyway, we can talk about that at another time. But bro,
I like him as a brother-in-law.
I think he'd be super great. So if anybody out there is like him, but like you're a real person, you're not a character in a show, you can totally like reach out to me. So let's now talk about the Barksdale organization, okay? Because there is a push and pull in the Barksdale organization that is absolutely about the old way of doing things and the new way of doing things. This is a great segue to that relationship, bro, those in the transitions in the Barksdale group.
Well, yeah, I mean, like probably most people, that that's it was just such a good story. And basically what we're talking about is the relationship between Stringer Bell and Avon Barksdale, who, as we know, Avon is the head of this organization, but Stringer is a very close number 2. And Stringer, and I love the dichotomy of these personalities because
so different,
so good.
Avon is
so well written.
It's so well written because Avon is the quintessential gangster. Just as much as he enjoys the success, or more than enjoying the success, he loves his name to ring out. He wants people to know he's the top gangster in the city.
That's a rule. It's a rule of the game.
He just wants people, and he was in prison following the events of season 1. He spent season 2 in prison, but now because of some things he did, some underhanded things he did, he is now back on the street. Only after he had a 7-year sentence, he only served 2 years. And so now he's back on the street. Now, while he was gone, Stringer was setting up this for the drug trade in Baltimore. He was instrumental in setting it up like a business and reducing the amount of banging. So Stringer's thought process is, we're in this to make money. And there are ways for us to take this money and go legit. So what do we care about being, the kings of some street corners and we don't even really own anything? Like, that's ridiculous to him. And Avon is like, well, look, this is the game. And the game is being the top gangster. Now, so for Stringer to be able to create this environment where it's basically just drug selling as business, he creates the New Day Co-op, which along with Prop Joe, who is one of the leaders on the east side, just like Stringer and Avon are on the west side, and all the major drug dealers, or most of the major drug dealers, they all get together to all pool their money and buy the highest test drugs that they could get, the best package that they could get, and they share it, and they all have their territory mapped out, and there's no banging, there's no beef, and that's the goal to get to that. Look, we just sell this commodity like people sell other stuff.
Yeah,
right?
get a good product, sell it.
Exactly.
No banging. We're not attracting the police. We're minding our business the police.
Now. We're just, and so
we're just out here making money.
And there's one outlier who we didn't talk about, but his name.
Well, do it, bro. Do it.
Well, I'm just saying we had one outlier, Marlo, who was the only one who.
I'm sure we'll be able to talk about him next season, bro. I haven't seen next season, but they left him alive, right? We're gonna talk to. We'll have time to talk about him.
Yes, but it's important to bring him up because I just want to say he's the outlier in this whole situation that Stringer's trying to create.
That's right.
And the reason why it's important to say that is because he is from that same school of thought. Marlo is from that same school of thought that, look, it's all about being the number one, even if it's for that. One of his mentors told him, like, look, the jails and the graveyards are filled with people who wore the crown. And his immediate response was, but they wore it.
But they wore it.
But they wore it.
But they wore it.
So you have two people, Avon and Marlo, who are now banging over drug territory, which creates this rift between Stringer and Avon because, you know, Avon doesn't get it according to Stringer, and Stringer doesn't get it according to Avon. So I feel like,
and bro, it's also at war with the Amsterdam concept. Okay, I just had to plug that. Like that's another thing because the Amsterdam the idea of Amsterdam, that consolidating all the drug dealers selling drugs together. That's another new concept that is at war with the gangster mentality.
Right. So the reason why this was this storyline ultimately ultimately ended up in dividing these two lifelong friends because they both end up
that's a podcast in itself, funny.
I'm gonna just tell you that, you know, because Stringer betrays Avon through speaking to the police. Colvin, he speaks to Colvin, Major Colvin, who set up Amsterdam, and because he set up Amsterdam, Stringer thinks, well, this is a forward-thinking individual. Maybe he'll understand my problems. And basically what he wants Colvin to do is just lock Avon up for a few years so that he could just get this thing straight and get them off the street completely. That's his goal. And Avon betrayed Stringer because Stringer was involved with an attempted murder on somebody that Avon was affiliated with.
Brother Muzon.
Brother Muzon. I didn't even want to say that because that's a whole nother convo. But the
point out the window now.
But the point. No. We're good.
We're still being very responsible. We're being very responsible
because this is the last topic. But all I want to say is that television when Stringer and Avon were on the balcony. They were on the deck of Avon's new downtown condo in his name as a result of what Stringer's been putting together.
Legitimate business.
Both of them know they betrayed each other. And just seeing that interaction, I'm just saying, I've watched that scene so many times because you see the pain in both of their eyes, just like
both of their hearts break.
And bro,
hearts break.
And bro, I didn't tell you,
hearts are broken.
I didn't tell you this. You all, if you watched our first two podcasts on the Wire, you know that Aubrey at the beginning, he has been guessing about what parts of this show would break us, meaning make me and Brittany cry. And I didn't tell y'all that was the only time where I actually have teared up so far in this entire show. It is the part where it is a part where Avon and Stringer are talking to each other, and they both know that the only way for them to succeed is to kill each other. They know that they cannot operate together anymore and
when
live and be successful.
I text you guys, that was a goodbye hug. They knew that they weren't, one of them wasn't, I wasn't going to see you again.
Yeah, they knew. They knew. And my heart was just so broken because it was true. they were no longer compatible in life. They were no longer compatible in business. And guess what? That was all. Those are all the categories.
Ooh,
And
that's another topic towards your relationship. We was talking about relationships, girl. That's another friendship. Listen, because it happens. You can part ways.
And guess what? And they had both been in denial about it for a while. That same kind of wanting to hold on because of what we once had, that they had been doing it for a while, but they had been incompatible for quite a while. And again, under different circumstances, as young people, if they had been children with more options available to them, they might not even have been two people that would have been friends as young people. But it was just that the only place for these two kind of people with leadership potential of any sort to become leaders, it was in the drug trade. That was the only leadership channel that they had available.
And what else was so tragic about it was that if either of them could have got the other one on the same page, obviously, from my perspective and my personal experience, I completely understand what Stringer was trying to do. But what I also understood is if either of them could have got the other one on the same page, they may have been more successful on either way. If they would have decided to go full gangster, or if they decided to, work their way out of the game completely. But I'm gonna tell you, it ultimately at the end of the season, Avon, because Stringer informed on him, goes to jail, but Stringer gets shot. And I'm gonna tell you, I was devastated. Stringer got shot. Like that was some TV that I'm like, yo, this is just TV. Why am I impacted by this? But you could just
his days were numbered to win.
I felt his struggle. And the thing is that I just felt his struggle of trying to do something. Like it made so much sense to him. Like, look, y'all, who cares about these corners? Like who cares? We're just trying. And through him trying to, maneuver and one of the writer, he said that it was hard for him to kill Stringer, but he said because everybody loved him. But he said it wouldn't have been real because he was trying to civilize a game that just will not be civilized. So for me to show him,
it won't be civilized.
Yeah. So for me to show him succeeding or even continuing, it just wouldn't have been realistic. And I'll just say that as far as television goes, man, that moment of, when he got shot, the first time I saw that was with someone who was already watching The Wire. I didn't start watching The Wire until after season 3. So the person I was watching The Wire with, they were, that episode happened to be the episode that they were watching, right? But I wasn't really paying attention because I didn't watch the show at this point. But when they shot Stringer, like it was a real person. I'm like, yo, it's just
that's
TV.
A character. Calm down.
But it's funny because even though I knew it was coming up, and even though I knew how it ended, man, when that came around, I still wasn't ready.
And can I tell you? And I
wasn't ready.
I knew Stringer had to go. I knew Stringer had to go, and I knew he needed to go since he killed D'Angelo, right? So there was a I don't think we covered it in today's episode, but if you've seen the earlier seasons, Avon Barksdale's nephew, who was another one of those people who's just caught up in the game because he was in it, couldn't get out, family circumstance, economic, social circumstance, in the game, was not good at the game, didn't like the game, but was in the game, and ended up being victimized by the game and was in jail, was going to be in there for 20 years, and ended up being killed by Stringer, or Stringer orchestrated his murder and made it look like a suicide. And Avon Barksdale, technically Stringer's boss, did not know. And there was a point in season 3 where Stringer owns up to it. And the reason he actually owns up to
Oh, that
it,
was a good scene. Oh,
the reason
good.
Stringer owns up to it is because it was the first moment in the entire 3 seasons where they named their incompatibility. Because Avon said to Stringer, you just might not be gay in the way that we need you to be successful in this trade. And he said, you never have been. That's what Avon said. He named that fundamental incompatibility. And in order to say, oh, we're a little bit more compatible than you think, Stringer said, I killed your nephew because it had to be done to support this trade. Because of the game, I had to kill him. And guess what? That's when, listen, that was unexpected. I knew that D'Angelo's murder was going to be one of the reasons that Stringer had to go, but him owning up to it and Avon sitting there and the two of them having to have that conversation, I didn't expect that. That was another time where I was experiencing.
The background to that is the police getting into there. That was McNulty getting in there, speaking to D'Angelo's baby's mom, saying, I'm looking at these scars on D'Angelo's neck, and I went and tested it out. There's no way that this could have been a suicide. He would have just sat on the floor and not been able to strangle himself. There's no possible way. That then leads Donetta, who is D'Angelo's baby's mom, to tell his mother. His mother is then talking to Stringer, and Stringer is like, trying to tell Donetta and D'Angelo's mother, listen, they're police. That's what they do. They're trying to break us up. But really, Stringer is covering his own ass. And really, it's just like, but Stringer, but none of this would have happened. But this is what happens, Stringer, when you start operating in your own way and in your own mindset. You think that this is what's happening. This will be best, but you're not even conceptualizing.
That is what was best. I mean, that.
Well, I mean, to him, but
to anybody other than Avon and Donette. I mean, other than Avon and
we've had that debate. Yeah,
so
right. We've had that debate, but what I do want to say is that even with Stringer dealing with this whole thing and realizing, listen, we need to be a business, B&B Enterprises, he also realizes that the shady foolishness that happens in the drug game is the same shady foolishness that happens in the business game. Giving people your money, thinking that they're going to do right with it because your money. Avon has to let him know when they see you, they just see another black man from the ghetto. This is what he's saying to him. And he's realizing, but at this point, this is when Avon wants to be a gangster. He's like, listen, these people stole my money. Let's handle it. Even the gangsters are like, because he was getting caught up with one of I think he was a senator, Clay Davis. He got caught up with Clay Davis. He gave Clay Davis money to help him with B&B Enterprises. Clay Davis screwed him over. And Avon was ready to, squad up. I need y'all to do something.
Stringer.
He's saying this. I mean, Stringer is ready, like, let's go. He's talking to one of the OG drug dealers that are like more level-headed and leader. And his name is Slim. Slim goes, you want us to kill Clay Davis? The Clay Davis? No. Like he's saying to him, what you're saying right now, it literally makes no sense. You think that we won't get in trouble over that? You think we won't get caught over that? And
you're
so
mixing the games. You're mixing the games.
You're mixing them up. And it is because, again, I think Stringer, while we know that money talks, right? We also know that your class, where people place you, also talks. But again, Stringer's character was complex because even when they finally got a chance to go into his house, which I never said anything, but I've always been wanting to see where Stringer lives. I just been wanting to see that.
There's a reason we didn't get to see it until he was dead.
Until he was dead, because McNulty picks up, and I can't remember which one it was, but he was
The Wealth of Nations. The book was The Wealth of Nations.
He was like, Stringer, who was this guy? Like, I don't even know who I was chasing at this point, because really, McNulty is looking at that book like, I have better opportunities. I'm a police officer. I would never read this book. This is what's going through his mind. Like, this person was better than you. They were smarter than you. This is what's happening. But that, so
And
that was
sis,
something I just thought was just really pivotal for Stringer. Just him seeing that it's awful anywhere you go. There's people thieving. There's gangsters everywhere. They just look different.
And sis, I want to thank you for naming, for starting to take us back to the politics, sis, to take us back to the politics, because that was the piece of the show that was the new line that we saw in episode 3. So thank you for taking us back to the politics. Because when you did that, sis, you gave me an idea for a new symbol that we can use to close out this episode.
Let's go.
For a voting symbol. Business cards. All right, let me make a case. Stop. There, as you know, so listen, Stringer and Avon, listen, they've been off the grid until season 3, until now, because now they have enough legitimate business income to actually have phone numbers that they can call clean numbers. And it was so symbolic of the transition when Stringer took a business card out of his very wallet and it had on it B&B Enterprises. And he hands it to McNulty, right? He was like, listen, I'm legitimate now. Let me hand you a business card, right? Pivotal point. And there was also a pivotal point with a business card related to the police. McNulty, he traipses him. You talked about it earlier, sis. McNulty takes himself right on over to D'Angelo's late girlfriend's house and hands her a business card and says, I believe that D'Angelo was murdered. But it was not suicide. Series of events kicked off by just that moment of stopping by and dropping off his business card to say, call me if you want to partner with me in investigating this further. Business card on the politics side. Listen, business cards were muck on the politics side, but there was absolutely, there were moments of exchange of business card between the politicians as they were making deals, and politicians pretending to be in cahoots, or actually being in cahoots with the drug dealers, but also deceiving the drug dealers. Again, business cards being exchanged. I would like to recommend that the symbol that we use to tabulate the Wright Perspective on season 3 of The Wire be business cards. What do you think? That was a top-notch sell. And I know that because I'm a gangsta.
I hate it. I don't hate it. It was just such a top-notch show. I had to rate you.
You always got to berate me, y'all. Y'all, let's use business cards. I don't like police badges because it's like, if this season was really about the politics and so much else, can we use business cards?
Let's do it. Sounds good.
Well, I have a wrapping thought. As we were talking through these various things, there were certain universal truths that started to come up. And as they were coming up, I just wrote them down. There are truths, things that prove true